Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us once again on Dojo Live today, which is Monday, the 18th of March, 2019, where we're basically talking about the future directly from those who are creating it. My name is Kim Landis, broadcasting live from one of Nearsoft's offices in Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico. Joining me are my co-hosts and co-workers, Carlos Ponce, as
Hi,
well as Axel Becerril. Hi, guys.
how
Hi,
you
hi
doing?
there.
Good. This is Axel's first time on Dojo Live, folks. He's one of our developers, so
Yeah.
we'll cut him some slack if he's a little nervous.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be discussing the importance of developer engagement. And here to tell us how he's helping developers basically create, engage, and give back to the developer community is Simon Maple, the Director of Developer Relations at Snick or Sneak.io. It's even them, they themselves have this ongoing discussion, right? Tomato, tomato, Caribbean, Caribbean. Welcome to Dojo Live, Simon.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting
Perfect.
me.
Our
Absolutely.
pleasure. So to get us started, Simon, could you please just tell us a bit more about yourself as well as your background?
Sure, yeah, my pleasure too. So I've been a developer relations or in technical evangelism or developer advocacy, whatever you want to call it this month. I've been in that kind of role for probably around 7 or 8 years now. And before then, I was a developer for approximately another 10 to 12 years as well. I started off my career at IBM on a mainframe software called WebSphere, application server based really for Java applications and Java EE applications specifically. And I did a lot of time in the kind of more enterprise traditional style development techniques and practices. And I did, as well as development, I was obviously going out, talking to customers, doing on-sites, doing a lot of conference work as well, and some community work. And I felt like I really enjoyed that kind of interaction with other people, as well as that technical background, technical development. I did definitely enjoy that, going to conferences, speaking. I love the thrill and the rush of being on stage, as well as just helping and teaching other people with some of the things that I've learned in my time as well. So I decided to bite the bullet. I tried to do a half developer relations, half development, software development.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up just doing two jobs, and it wasn't worth it. So I decided I had to pick one or the other. So I moved over to developer relations at IBM. I joined a company called Zero Turnaround 5 years, 6 years ago. Sorry. And I was a director of developer relations there for about 5 years. And then I literally just moved to Snick around 1 year ago, and I've literally just celebrated my 1 year there today, and in the last couple of weeks. And I run the DevRel team here as well at Snick.
Okay, well, congratulations. So now that you brought up Snick for us, why don't you please tell us real quickly what it is that Snick does? What's your product? What problem are you solving?
Sure, yeah. So actually, I really when I was looking at my move to my previous move to one or another company, I saw Snick, and the thing that really invited me with Snick is the fact that what they actually do is they're trying to solve a real problem that affects a lot of people, and it's a problem that genuinely helps software engineering and software development today. So the role that Snick has in the ecosystem is to find and fix software vulnerabilities that exist in third-party code. So we have a whole bunch of developers obviously just writing code, and they're going to have a number of dependencies in their application. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting to see sometimes how when a developer writes a small piece of code, how much extra code that will pull in. And when you actually deploy an application, you actually deploy this massive beast of an application, and you've only actually written a small amount of code. So what Snick does is it looks at your dependencies, which is the vast size of this application, rather than just the code you've written. And we try and find known vulnerabilities in those dependencies. And we will not just tell you about where the vulnerabilities exist, but we'll provide you with an automated remediation about how you can go about fixing those, to the extent that we'll actually create pull requests into your repositories and things like that. So we're finding and fixing known security vulnerabilities in your open source libraries. We like to say we help people use open source securely.
All right, very good, very interesting. I understood, I think personally, about like 10-15% of what you just said, much more than I would have understood about 3 years ago.
I was going to say, I'm not doing my job well enough then if it's only 10, 15%.
You did a really good job. I don't have a technical background. But Axel, I'm sure that you have something. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a really common and big problem right now. The thing is that we as developers want to deliver as fast as we can. So we are relying in other people's work to accomplish that. But the problem there is that there is a lot of libraries there, and it's easy just to pull them to your project in order to move forward. But there are you cannot be so sure about what's going on with all that code that it's just being added to the project, but you don't actually see directly to it. So GitHub and GitLab does have some analysis in the dependencies of your projects. But what I see that your company does is those automatic fixes. We already have bots performing some pull requests, right?
Yeah. So we have a whole bunch of if you're automatically monitoring and things like that, we'll automatically send you pull requests with how to remediate your vulnerabilities as well. So yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, because that kind of things are a little tedious to deal with.
Yeah, and you know what? I think the things like the GitHub and GitLab support you mentioned, I think it's really great, particularly with things like NPM audit as well. You know,
Yeah.
the more and more these kind of things are built into a lot of the platforms, it really gives developers and other people that understanding about this problem is here. So, for example, when you mentioned about developers not knowing what code they have, what dependencies they have. When I go to speak at conferences, I ask, I put my hand up and say, who knows how many direct dependencies you have? Who knows how many transitive dependencies you have? And virtually no one at the end is putting their hands up. And it's because no one actually knows what's in their application, what they're pulling in. And it's a real serious issue. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other issue is, people want to deliver more and more. Like, we hear the terms like digital transformation, right? And, the idea of DevOps, which, as developers, we want to write code and we want to push it to production quickly. Sometimes people hear about this happening several times a day, maybe every week, every couple of weeks, every sprint maybe. But there are real issues around that if we don't have other things in place like security testing. And so, one of our big goals. I mean, we consider ourselves a developer-focused company, so we try and dig into where developers are interacting. So IDEs, GitHub, these automatic pull requests. We do testing on pull requests as well. So if someone was to raise a pull request, we'll test on the pull request. So we try and really interact at that level. And by doing that, it's the only way you will be able to release safely, because everything a developer does or everything someone does in that workflow, you're constantly testing. There's never the old traditional style. When I was at IBM and we had big huge clients that used to deliver every however many years. I'm talking years ago, the traditional style, and you used to have audits every year or every couple of years, and it was scary. Even back then, when you only had to release every year. But when you think about development now, where you're pushing to production daily, and then you think of a 6 monthly audit, that's scary, because then you think there's 6 months worth of code that hasn't been audited or hasn't been tested, and it's a real problem.
Yeah, is it only related with open source dependencies?
So SNCC, the product SNCC is we're focused on open source dependencies. Yeah, I think it's good that, in my opinion anyway, from the experience I've had with developer tools, the best developer tools have a very significant focus as to what they do. And there are different things. You have security testing of your source code, and you have open source dependencies. There are right tools for both of those jobs. And so, you should create a set of tools that work for you as an organization. And so SNCC focuses on third-party dependencies, right. And we focus on doing that well.
So basically you allow the organizations to control what they can control, and then you help them to control what they can't.
Yeah, it's a lot of the time it's also helping organizations to almost opening up developers' eyes to what they're actually doing in the organization, because sometimes developers, even they're doing more and more and more, and the pressures on a developer is greater than ever. We have project managers, we have managers, we have security teams, performance teams, testing teams, and so much of that functionality has come onto the developer, and so much of that pressure has come onto the developer. The developer just wants to release their code. Some of them want to do it well. Others, they're like, oh, you know what? I'm a 9-to-5 developer. I just want to push this code out. So it's increasingly important that we provide developers with those tools, whatever the tools, so that they can do that job better. And from the organization's point of view, it's going to benefit them hugely.
So there's tools like applications, but then there's also tools like yourself, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I
So
mean, so
what are you as as developer relations? Like, what exactly is that role?
so
And
that
what for you personally took you to that crossroad? Okay,
it's a
so
great
you did.
question. Yeah, and you know what? Actually, developer relations or developer advocacy is it's one of those things that it actually means different things to different people. So for me personally, I see a developer relations role as someone who empowers developers, someone who actually helps educate developers and enables developers to work quicker and faster and better on a specific platform. So if I take my case for an example on Snick, you know, we have this freemium model, so people can just become users of Snick without paying a penny. And so what I want to do is I want to help developers understand, first of all, the need of some kind of security testing. So I want to educate developers. I want to help developers understand why they need certain things. I also want to make sure that, you know, should they choose Snick as their solution, of course, there are other tools and other products. And when I try and educate around security, if I educate, you know, around a developer on security, and then they go and choose another tool or whatever rather than Snick, and then some come to Snick, you know, obviously I'd prefer them to come to Snick. But if they do either, I'm still helping developers. I'm still doing, you know, I still feel like it's part of my role to do this for the ecosystem, for the you know, the software world kind of thing. So education is a huge part of that. And then when it comes to making sure that Snick as a company is very consumable from a user or a developer, it's very key to me that, you know, we have the kind of tutorials, we have the like how-tos, the to-do kind of style of how do I get up and running with something. So that there's an amount of that as well. And a lot of this, both the content of education and content of you know, the using Snick or any kind of tool, for me, that, you know, that can be blogs, reports, webinars, podcasts like you know, like this one, or the webinar like this one. Also a whole bunch of outreach face-to-face, so conferences face-to-face at customer sites. There's a whole different way. There's a whole different, you know, number of ways in which this kind of interaction can happen. And then one of the bigger ones, which is a really important thing for me as well, is developer communities. And developer communities, I think, you know, they can exist naturally, and they can exist because we can make them happen. And both are just as important. Sometimes when they happen naturally, they don't necessarily, you know, they happen naturally because they have a need. There's a need there which all developers are trying to gravitate to. When they happen because, you know, someone's trying to, you know, create a place where developers can come, that's just as good as well, because so long as, you know, if the need's there, then that kind of community will succeed. If the need's not there, then developers just plain won't join it. And also, it's about creating that value. It's not about, you know, it's like that great JFK quote, which he said once when he was talking about developer communities. I'm sure JFK famously said, "It's don't think about what your community, your developer community can do for you, but what can you do for your developer community?" And it's truly about that. It's not about what you can take from a community. It's about what what value you give and what you can offer the developer community.
Right. As I was preparing for today's talk, I came across a quote that really kind of made me laugh. And he said, engineers have finely honed, if not overly developed, bullshit detectors. Right. So how would you, as developer relations, how do you make life better for developers and not just make money for a platform? Like, how do you get over this idea of, I'm not self-serving, this is genuine? What are the steps that you take?
So I think there are a number of different ways that people come to the developer advocacy. Oh, that was one of the questions I didn't ask actually of your last set. But there are a number of different ways in which you can go into a developer relations role. And one of the ways myself and actually a number of people on my team as well came through into a developer relations role is from actually being a developer ourselves. And the benefit of being a developer and then coming into a developer relations role is that we ourselves have a very finely tuned and honed bullshit detector. And as a result, you know, we know what is bullshit and what is not bullshit. And as a result, when we talk to someone, you know, we're not just going to try and, you know, sell them crap they don't need, right? We want to make sure that what we are actually doing is providing value. And we can do that because we know what is valuable and what is not valuable. And I know there are a number of people who equally come into the developer relations role who are not technical or who are not developers themselves, and I think you know, there's nothing to say that they couldn't equally, you know, have a very finely tuned bullshit detector, because, you know, it's more of a mindset thing. And I think you know, once you either get it or you don't. And if you don't get it, you're going to be a bad DevRel person, because you're just going to annoy people, and you know, developers just that. This is another thing I hate doing, saying developers, because it's like, you know, developers are people too, right? They're just people. And so it's like, you know, calling, you know, sets of developers or whatever, you know, trying to segregate that group. They're just people. They're just people who are just trying to do something, right? So, you know, I think people either get that or they don't. And you know, if you get it and you understand and you try and provide value to you know, fellow developers, then people will react well to you, and they'll trust you. They'll learn from you. Will learn from them as well, which is absolutely key in a DevRel role, to make sure that, particularly from a product DevRel role and a platform DevRel role, to understand what works and what doesn't, feed that back, because you know, we are a resource for developers in the community as well as the other way around. Developers can learn from us, we can learn from developers, and feed that back into the product. So it's this kind of, you know, reciprocal kind of thing. And so yeah, you know, if my bullshit detector goes off, I don't post it. I don't talk about it like that. So and it, you know, it happens when I'm at conferences. How far do I go talking about SNCC versus talking about something else?
Right.
Luckily, well, not luckily, I tend to work for companies that you know, do respect developers and have freemium versions and these kind of things for developers. So we have a freemium version for developers, open source developers, you know, limited number of tests per month. So you know, this is an amazing way in which developers can come join our platform, and I can talk about that at conferences. So I'm not saying, oh yeah, first of all, you need to pay for this, then you need to sign your life away here, then you need to give us your firstborn, and only then can you use our product, right? This is the bullshit detector, where we then start talking about some amazing product in an ivory tower, and you know, really not relevant to developers at their level. So
that's one way to kind of encourage that symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
Simon, I have a question for you real quick. And of course, as I clearly stated at the beginning of, before we went on the air, is from the non-engineer standpoint. My question is more how can I say this? From the engagement point of view, the engagement itself point of view, you know? Because we're talking about the importance of developer engagement. What can you say to our audience that drove you to create? No, wait a minute. Let me rephrase this. Please bear with me. I understand you created the Java users group, right? So
a virtual Java users
virtual
group.
Java users group.
Yeah. This is about 6 years ago.
Exactly, the virtual Java users group. And actually, someone from our guys brought it to my attention. So, what did you notice any lack of engagement in the industry that drove you to create the virtual Java users group, or is it related to your endeavors as the founder of the virtual Java users group? What you notice about engagement, or how is it connected?
So, the reason I created the virtual Java users group, this was back in 2013, I think, was because, I mean, ultimately I used to go into London a fair amount for the London Java user group, which is a user group that I'm one of the co-leaders of. And I live around 2 hours, hour and a half outside of London. And at the time, in 2012, we had our first child. And as a developer relations person, you know, traveling anyway, and then having to go to work, and then having to go into London of an evening and so forth, that got pretty straining pretty quickly. I was crazy tired anyway, just from all the family stuff as well as the work stuff and things like that. And I thought, there's got to be a better way whereby we can have a community whereby we can learn, we can network with people, but we don't have to travel 2 hours either way, you know, 4 hours either way, just to do that kind of thing. And I was trying to work out how we can, and there was a lot of resources. There was stuff on YouTube. There was content available online. But that's just content. That's not a community. That's just information. And I thought, well, you know, why don't I create a community? Why don't I create a virtual jug? virtual Java user group. And so it came out of a need. It really came out of a need first. And I thought, well, if I need it, maybe other people do. Maybe there are people who don't live near a Java user group, or people whose Java user groups don't meet up that regularly. So I created this. It was very simple to create, actually very similar to what we're doing now. It's a number of Hangouts that we recorded that people all over the world. And we actually got some of the best speakers around the world, as I know you have as well, Carlos, here in some of your previous sessions as well. The ability to get speakers and for there to be no travel cost, very limited time. And for to basically just say, can we have an hour of your time or 30 minutes of your time? And yeah, so it came out of a need, and as a result, when there's a need and other people have that need, a community is born. It's as simple as that.
Congratulations.
And yeah, actually, thank you. Now we have well over 16,000 members of the user group already. So it's really key. And we created another one in a similar vein. Actually, this was the Java user group. That virtual Java user group is an independent user group. This new one that we created only about a month ago, actually, is called the Secure Developer. And this one's actually a SNCC powered secure developer community, but we're keeping it as a vendor neutral educational resource for developers who just want to understand a little bit more about security, have that basic understanding, so that when they actually write code and develop code, they have some basic practices they can follow and some good learning, good material. So yeah, that's another thing that we just created. Over 1,000 people already on that one as well. So yeah, where there's a need, people will come.
So I have a question going back to this idea of open source, which is the main focus for SNCC.
Either's good.
Like you've been saying SNCC, right? So I'll refer to SNCC. And I think, Axel, you could probably kind of have some insight here too. Like, I'm wondering how it is that how products can encourage their kind of ideal developer profiles, I guess, to actually be the ones who are utilizing or contributing to their own code. Like, is there kind of like a way that you as developer relations or anyone kind of can sort of gear that toward the people that you actually prefer to be working on your code? I mean, my understanding is a lot of time, I guess I envision the people who are participating more in open source to be kind of less perhaps less experienced, because they're more excited, they need to garner this experience, it's available to them, right? But then, of course, not always the case, but then the more seasoned developers, the more what I would assume to be the more quality code, perhaps now they're more focused on other things, their own companies, their own products, just older, life is busier, like you just said, family time and whatever. So how do you strike that balance, or is there a balance to be struck?
Within maintainers, so to have a balance of I think that there's a number of things in which you can so from a junior developer, for me there are a couple of real easy ways that this kind of thing can be fixed to level up a junior developer almost instantly. One of which is not just SNCC tooling, but any kind of tooling. There are a number of different tools out there, from things like find bugs, for example, or check marks, or CodeStar, for example, or SNCC as well, right? So that they can be used in a way whereby bugs or a number of issues can be taken out of the code that a developer will contribute before that actually gets sent across to the main repository. So there's a level of kind of eliminating some of the more basic mistakes that can be put into code before someone actually pushes that. But the big thing for me really, whenever we talk about any of this, is mentoring. And I think people learn. Everyone's always learning. Doesn't matter what level you are, you're always learning, and there's always someone better than you, and there's always something you can learn from that person. So, I'm a big fan of mentoring groups. I know there's a lady actually in security called Tanya. Let me find her name. Her name is Tanya Yanka, TanyaJanca. She hacks purple on Twitter, and I've noticed she's been calling for mentees and mentors in and around security and around open source, and trying to pair people who literally are calling out for help and calling out for someone to hold their hand and kind of take them to the next step.
I imagine it's easier to find mentees than mentors. So how do you encourage people to mentor others?
It is, because a lot of the time it's the mentees that have more of the time, more of the need for the mentor, whereas the mentor very often doesn't have a lot of the time, and there are fewer of them. So I think first of all, we can work in groups anyway, and communities will help us ask questions of each other. And in that respect, you actually don't have a direct one-to-one mentee-mentor relationship. You have a group relationship whereby someone asks a question, the group responds. That's how communities work, and that's crazy important. There are other groups as well. So Tanya asks for mentors, mentees, and I'm sure she'll get more mentees than mentor. Kind of being put through. A lot of mentors, they do have a number of mentees. So I'm actually a member of a community called MAM, which is Meet a Mentor in London. It's a community which is created by a company called Repworks, and they've had some great success by pairing people who want to be in a certain position and someone else who has been in that position or knows how to the qualities or the requirements that you have to be you have to have achieved to get into that position, and people help each other joining that. And I think it's great for mentors as well. I mean, I learn a lot by talking to people about what worked for me, what didn't, and it's very easy to then self-reflect when you're talking to someone about your journey as well.
Perfect. Well, can you believe it, Simon? We're actually coming up to the end of our half
Wow.
hour already. Yes, time flies when you're having fun. So I wanted to see, Axel, if you perhaps had one final question from the developer perspective for Simon, and then once that question wraps up, any final words of wisdom that you might have for us, please.
Okay. I got one question. We are having this meeting all remotely, and a lot of developers work remotely, and you create the virtual Java user group. But do you think there's still a need for us developers to look at each other's faces directly in this community building importance? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think what you can get in a face-to-face meeting, over a coffee, a water, a beer, whatever, wherever you're meeting over. I think it's you get more quality discussion, quality time with that person. You actually create more of a relationship with that person as well. I think a lot of companies, so for example, SNCC, as an example, we have a London office, a Tel Aviv office, a Boston office, and we have a whole bunch of people all over the world working remotely. We still have every 6 months, the whole company comes together and we talk all face to face, and we're in the same location, Tel Aviv and then London, every 6 months. And it's great to speak to each other there. We find that when we're there speaking to each other, when we then go remotely, we actually have better working relationships remotely as well. Mm-hmm. And also at the speed at which we're growing, it's great because when I was 6 months ago, about 8 months ago, when we all met in Tel Aviv, when we all met in London, the company had almost like doubled, trebled by the time we actually then met in Tel Aviv after that. So it's great. It's great that face to face, you cannot beat it. And one of the things I said when I created the virtual jug is that I don't ever want this virtual community to replace a physical community. It's there to complement that. It's almost like a fortify, or to be there in addition to a face to face. But yeah, as a developer advocate as well, I do an incredible amount of online content. And the whole team works really hard to create that online content. But we don't just say, we're going to sit at home and we're going to write content. We make sure we're out talking to customers, out talking at conferences and meeting people afterwards and talking to them. And that's really one of the best ways of creating that, the best relationships.
Great.
It mirrors a lot of actually, I think, what we do here at Nearsoft as well. We have our annual team building weeks. For a couple of years, it was twice a year, but now it's just once. Did you hear that, Roberto? He likes All right, very good. Well, I was going to ask you to kind of end on some final words of wisdom, but I think that naturally sort of ended on its final words of wisdom, that technology doesn't replace humanity, right?
Anything more we say now will just ruin that, right? So we better not.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, Simon, is there anything about specifically about excuse me, about SNCC that you would like to tell our audience? Can you elaborate a little bit about that, or anything you want to mention about SNCC? Maybe that's up to you. So we're inviting you to talk to us about SNCC, or to the public, to the audience.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I'll say a couple of things. I mean, one thing I want to say is how important it is that you as a developer or you as a company, when you deliver and create your applications, it's incredibly important you actually know what your application is rather than just the code that someone's writing. And the number of people out there, we hear stories of EventStream and ESLint and LeftPad, all these developers that are writing content, writing code and putting it into these code repositories, and we just pull them out, whether either directly or through transitive or indirect dependencies. And the applications that we create, it's utmost important to the business that we understand that what we deploy, we are responsible for. And as a result, the responsibility of that application as it gets created from the developer up is everyone's responsibility, but the developers, first and foremost. So education of the teams, the business, to understand what is in that application and what you deploy is critical, particularly in security. And so I'd one of the things that I'd encourage is for developers and all the way up, people up to CISOs and CTOs, to understand what how your application is actually built, in terms of what all the modules, all the parts, all the libraries that you're using. Of course, you can use some tools like SNCC to do that, and I'd encourage you to try SNCC for free. But the greater thing is just to change your mindset to think about it like that. And one of the other things that I'd like to mention is that I mentioned the Secure Developer, which is like another online community that we do. It's to increase your education. There's a huge number of knowledge places that you can go to increase your education. OWASP is a great one. The securedeveloper.com is another one that you can sign up, and you actually get every 2 weeks. We do webinars and things like that in which we're able to educate and share knowledge across the community. So understanding as a business what you're actually producing as an app, what you're representing, that app represents you. So it's important to know what that is, and increasing the basic understanding of security throughout your development teams. Those two things, I think I will finish on.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Simon. I know that it's the end of your day over there. So have a great dinner, glass of wine, enjoy your family.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you very much.
Good night. Thank you, Carlos, Axel, for your time as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And also thank you, Simon, for having agreed to be with us. And the only thing left for me to do is mention that all the contact info for you or for the SNCC, website is going to be right there on the DojoLIVE website. So keep an eye on that, folks. That's going to be the best way to contact Simon. All his pertinent contact info is going to be in there. With that being said, Simon, again, thank you, and we're going to be in touch. Thank you so much, and thank you, Axel. Thank you, Kim.
Take care, everyone. Until next time.